Why me?
The woman standing in that empty apartment was named Sarah Mitchell. At first glance, there was nothing unusual about her story. She grew up in a quiet American suburb, attended public school, worked hard, stayed out of trouble, and followed the path she believed would eventually lead to success. Like millions of Americans, she believed that if she worked hard enough and treated people well, life would reward her efforts. More importantly, she believed family would always stand beside her. For most of her life, there was one person she never questioned, one person she never doubted, one person she would have trusted with every dollar in her bank account and every secret in her heart. That person was her older sister, Emily. To everyone around them, Sarah and Emily represented the kind of sisterhood people admired. They shared birthdays, holidays, vacations, and countless family memories. Friends often described them as inseparable. Even their parents joked that wherever one sister went, the other wasn't far behind. Looking back now, those memories feel different. The smiles still exist in the photographs, but the meaning behind them changed forever after the truth finally came to light. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. To understand how Sarah lost the future she spent years building, we need to go back long before that empty apartment. We need to go back to childhood. Sarah was 7 years younger than Emily. As the younger sister, she admired everything about her. Emily was confident, outgoing, and naturally charismatic. Teachers loved her. Neighbors praised her. Family members constantly spoke about her accomplishments. When Sarah entered a room, she often felt invisible standing beside her sister. Yet she never resented it. In fact, she felt proud. She saw Emily as the standard she wanted to live up to. If Emily joined a school club, Sarah wanted to join one too. If Emily earned good grades, Sarah wanted to achieve the same. Their relationship seemed built on admiration and loyalty. At least that was how Sarah remembered it. Years later, after everything had happened, she would revisit those childhood memories, searching for clues she had missed. There were moments she could not explain. Small incidents that seemed harmless at the time but looked very different through the lens of betrayal. A missing award certificate. A rumor that mysteriously spread through school. An opportunity that disappeared without explanation. Back then they felt like random disappointments. Later they would become pieces of a much larger puzzle. As the sisters grew older, their lives followed different paths. Emily married young. Sarah focused on education. While Emily settled into family life, Sarah became determined to build a career. She worked multiple jobs while attending college. She sacrificed weekends, vacations, and social events. Friends often wondered how she maintained such discipline. Sarah's answer was always the same. She believed temporary sacrifice would eventually create permanent opportunity. Before we permanent opportunity, every late night felt worthwhile because she was working towards something bigger. Her parents expressed pride in both daughters, but they often worried Sarah was pushing herself too hard. Emily appeared supportive. She encouraged Sarah during difficult semesters and celebrated her academic achievements. Whenever Sarah felt overwhelmed, Emily was usually the first person she called. That trust became one of the strongest bonds in Sarah's life. It also became the very thing that would later be used against her. The breakthrough came when Sarah was 32 years old. After years of effort, she received an opportunity that felt almost unbelievable. A major company offered her a position that promised financial stability, career advancement, and a fresh start in a new city. It was the kind of opportunity many professionals spend decades pursuing. The salary was higher than she had ever imagined earning. The benefits were exceptional. Most importantly, the position placed her on a path toward the future she had always envisioned. When the phone call arrived, Sarah cried tears of relief. Every sacrifice suddenly felt justified. Every setback finally made sense. For the first time in years, she could clearly see the life she had been working toward. She immediately called her parents. Then she called Emily. Her sister sounded excited. She congratulated her repeatedly. She told Sarah she deserved every bit of success coming her way. The conversation lasted nearly an hour. Sarah shared details about the company, the relocation plans, the timeline, and even personal concerns she had about moving away from family. It felt like a normal conversation between sisters. Looking back, Sarah would later say that single phone call may have been the most expensive conversation of her entire life. What Sarah didn't realize was that within days of sharing her news, strange things began happening. Friends became distant. Family members responded differently during conversations. Messages went unanswered. Invitations suddenly stopped arriving. At first she assumed everyone was busy. Life was complicated. People had responsibilities. She never imagined these changes were connected. But as the weeks passed, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Something had shifted. Something was happening behind her back. The worst part was that she couldn't identify the source. She felt as though she had entered a room where everyone knew a secret except her. Then came the first direct sign that something was terribly wrong. During a family gathering, a relative made a comment that left Sarah stunned. The relative accused her of abandoning her family for money. Sarah laughed at first because she assumed it was a joke. It wasn't. The accusation was sincere. And it wasn't coming from just one person. Similar comments began appearing everywhere. Family members repeated claims she had never made. Friends referenced conversations she had never had. The more she listened, the more alarming the situation became. Someone was spreading a story about her. Someone was painting her as selfish, arrogant, and ungrateful. Even worse, people seemed eager to believe it. Differently during conversations. At first Sarah focused on correcting the misinformation. She assumed a misunderstanding had occurred somewhere along the way. But every attempt to defend herself only seemed to make matters worse. It felt like she was fighting an invisible enemy. Every conversation uncovered a new rumor. Every explanation revealed another lie. She could not understand why so many people suddenly viewed her differently. Then one evening, a family member revealed a detail that changed everything. According to several relatives, the source of these stories wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a coworker. It wasn't an old friend. The source was someone within the family. Sarah felt a chill run through her body. She immediately began mentally reviewing every person she knew. There was only one possibility she refused to consider. One name she couldn't allow herself to believe. Because if that name turned out to be true, the damage would reach far beyond her career. It would destroy the foundation of trust her entire life had been built upon. And what Sarah would discover next would force her to question every memory she shared with the person she loved most. Sarah spent the next several days trying to convince herself that she was overthinking everything. People became busy. Families went through phases. Friendships changed. There had to be a reasonable explanation for what was happening around her. Yet every conversation seemed to push her further toward a conclusion she desperately wanted to avoid. The warmth she had always felt from relatives was disappearing. Calls that were once returned within hours now went unanswered for days. Text messages received short, cold replies. Even her parents seemed different. There was a hesitation in their voices whenever they spoke to her, as though they were holding back thoughts they didn't want to say out loud. Sarah could feel it. Something had changed. The problem was that nobody would tell her what it was. Every time she asked, people brushed it off. They claimed everything was fine. They insisted she was imagining things. But she wasn't imagining anything. She could see it in their eyes. She could hear it in their voices. The people she loved were judging her for something she didn't understand. The situation became impossible to ignore during a Sunday family dinner. Gatherings like these had always been important to the Mitchell family. No matter how busy life became, everyone made an effort to show up. Sarah arrived expecting a normal evening. Instead, she walked into a room that felt strangely tense. Conversations stopped for brief moments whenever she entered. Several relatives avoided eye contact. Others forced awkward smiles. At first she tried to ignore it, but the atmosphere continued growing heavier throughout the evening. Then, during a conversation about her upcoming move, her uncle made a comment that caused the entire table to fall silent. He looked directly at Sarah and asked whether success was really worth abandoning the people who had supported her all these years. Sarah stared at him in confusion. She laughed softly, assuming he was joking. Nobody else laughed. The expression on her uncle's face told her he was completely serious. Before she could respond, another relative added that family should always come before money. A third person mentioned that people often changed once they started making more money than everyone around them. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. The conversation no longer sounded accidental. These comments were connected. For the rest of the evening she listened carefully. Piece by piece, a disturbing picture emerged. Family members believed she planned to cut contact after moving away. They believed she had been speaking negatively about her parents. They believed she thought she was better than everyone else. Some even believed she had accepted the job because she wanted to escape her family permanently. The accusations were so bizarre that Sarah struggled to process them. None of it was true. Not a single word. Yet the certainty in everyone's voices suggested they had heard these stories repeatedly. By the time dinner ended, Sarah realized she wasn't dealing with a misunderstanding. She was dealing with a campaign. Someone had spent weeks feeding lies to the people closest to her. And whoever was responsible knew exactly which buttons to push. They understood family dynamics. They understood personal insecurities. Most importantly, they understood how to make the lies believable. The drive home that night felt longer than usual. Sarah replayed every conversation in her head. The more she thought about it, the more unsettling the situation became. Random rumors rarely spread that effectively. This felt coordinated. The stories were detailed. They contained private information that only a handful of people knew. Whoever started them had access to Sarah's personal life. That realization narrowed the list of suspects dramatically. Still, she refused to think the worst. There had to be another explanation. There had to be. Yet deep down, a quiet voice continued asking the same question. Who knew enough about her life to make the lies sound convincing? The answer terrified her because only a few people fit that description. Her parents. A close friend. Or Emily. The following week brought even more problems. Sarah received a phone call from a friend she had known for nearly 15 years. The friend sounded uncomfortable from the moment the conversation began. After several minutes of awkward small talk, she finally admitted why she called. She wanted to know whether the rumors were true. Sarah asked which rumors. The silence that followed felt endless. Finally, her friend explained that multiple people had claimed Sarah was planning to use her new career to distance herself from everyone she grew up with. Some even believed she had been mocking friends and relatives behind their backs. Sarah's heart sank. The lies had traveled much further than she realized. They weren't confined to family anymore. They had spread into her social circle as well. Whoever was behind this wasn't simply gossiping. They were actively dismantling her reputation. As days turned into weeks, the emotional toll became overwhelming. Sarah found herself constantly defending actions she never took and words she never said. Every conversation felt like an interrogation. Every interaction carried an invisible tension. The excitement she once felt about her new job began fading beneath anxiety and frustration. Instead of preparing for the next chapter of her life, she was spending her energy cleaning up messes she didn't create. Sleep became difficult. Concentration became impossible. Even simple tasks felt exhausting. What troubled her most wasn't the lies themselves. It was the realization that so many people believed them without ever asking for her side of the story. Years of trust seemed to vanish overnight. Then something happened that changed the direction of the entire story. One evening, Sarah received an unexpected message from a cousin she rarely spoke with. The message was short but alarming. The cousin claimed there was something Sarah needed to know. At first, Sarah assumed it was another rumor. Instead, the cousin revealed a detail that sent a chill through her entire body. According to conversations happening behind closed doors, there was one person repeatedly sharing information about Sarah. One person who seemed present every time the rumors appeared. One person who always claimed to have special insight into Sarah's thoughts and intentions. Sarah stared at the message for several minutes. Her hands began trembling. Because the name mentioned by her cousin was the one she had spent weeks trying not to consider. Emily. The woman she trusted more than anyone. The woman who had celebrated her new job. The woman who called herself her biggest supporter. At first Sarah rejected the idea completely. It felt impossible. There had to be a mistake. Yet once the possibility entered her mind, certain memories started resurfacing. Small moments she had previously ignored suddenly appeared in a different light. Strange comments. Curious questions. Information that somehow reached other people despite being shared in confidence. None of it proved anything, but together the pieces formed a pattern she could no longer ignore. For the first time, Sarah allowed herself to ask a question she never thought she would have to ask. What if Emily wasn't trying to protect her? What if Emily was the reason all of this was happening? And as Sarah began searching for answers, she uncovered evidence that would force her to question everything she thought she knew about her sister. For the next several days, Sarah found herself trapped between two realities. In one reality, Emily was still the loving older sister she had admired her entire life. In the other, Emily was the person quietly dismantling her future one conversation at a time. Sarah desperately wanted the first reality to be true. The alternative was almost too painful to consider. She replayed years of memories in her mind, searching for evidence that would either clear Emily's name or confirm her worst fears. Every family vacation, every birthday celebration, every late-night conversation suddenly felt different. It was as if someone had handed her a new lens through which to view her entire life. The problem was that she still had no proof. Suspicion alone wasn't enough. She needed facts. Rather than confronting Emily immediately, Sarah decided to pay closer attention. She began speaking with relatives individually. She asked careful questions without revealing what she suspected. What she learned disturbed her. The stories being shared about her were remarkably consistent. Different people repeated nearly identical phrases. They described conversations Sarah supposedly had. They referenced opinions she supposedly expressed. Some of the details were so specific that they could only have come from someone who knew her personally. More alarming was the fact that many relatives believed the information came from a trustworthy source. Whenever Sarah asked where they heard these claims, the answers became vague. Nobody wanted to identify the source directly. Yet several people hinted that the information had come from someone close to the family. Someone they trusted. One afternoon, Sarah sat across from her aunt at a small coffee shop. Their conversation started casually before eventually turning toward the growing tension within the family. Sarah carefully asked why so many people seemed upset with her. Her aunt hesitated. She looked uncomfortable. For a moment it appeared she might change the subject entirely. Then she quietly admitted that people were worried. According to what they had heard, Sarah planned to move away and slowly cut ties with everyone. Some believed she was embarrassed by her family. Others believed she had been criticizing relatives for years. Sarah felt a mixture of anger and disbelief. None of it was true. Her aunt listened as Sarah explained her side of the story. When she finished, the older woman appeared genuinely surprised. That reaction alone told Sarah everything she needed to know. The lies had been presented as facts. Nobody had questioned them because they trusted the person delivering them. The more Sarah investigated, the more a troubling pattern emerged. Nearly every rumor seemed to originate shortly after she shared personal information with Emily. If she mentioned concerns about her new job, relatives somehow heard that she was complaining. If she discussed financial goals, people later accused her of becoming obsessed with money. If she expressed excitement about relocating, the story somehow transformed into her wanting to abandon her family. Each private conversation appeared to become distorted before being repeated to others. Sarah began keeping notes. Dates. Conversations. Timelines. She wasn't sure exactly what she was looking for, but instinct told her the details mattered. Then came the moment that changed everything. One evening, Sarah attended a small gathering hosted by a longtime family friend. Emily was there. So were several relatives. Throughout the evening, Sarah observed quietly. She noticed how naturally Emily guided conversations. She noticed how often people sought her opinion. She noticed how carefully she presented herself as concerned, supportive, and caring. To everyone else, Emily appeared to be the perfect sister. Then, during a discussion about Sarah's upcoming move, Emily made a comment she likely assumed would go unnoticed. "I just hope success doesn't change her too much." The statement sounded harmless, even thoughtful. Several people nodded in agreement. But Sarah heard something different. It wasn't what Emily said. It was what she implied. The comment planted doubt while allowing Emily to appear innocent. It suggested concern without making a direct accusation. Suddenly Sarah recognized the technique. Similar phrases appeared throughout many of the rumors. Small suggestions. Subtle implications. Questions disguised as observations. Emily rarely made direct attacks. Instead, she planted seeds and allowed others to draw conclusions themselves. That realization shook Sarah deeply. Because it meant the situation might be far more deliberate than she originally imagined. Over the following weeks, Sarah continued gathering information. What she discovered painted an increasingly disturbing picture. Several family members privately admitted that Emily often discussed Sarah when she wasn't present. She frequently expressed concern about Sarah's attitude. She questioned Sarah's motives. She hinted that success had changed her. None of these statements seemed harmful individually. Together, however, they created a powerful narrative. Over time, relatives began viewing Sarah through the lens Emily had created for them. Yet one question continued haunting Sarah. Why? What could possibly motivate Emily to do this? Jealousy seemed too simple. The destruction unfolding around her required effort. Planning. Persistence. This wasn't one careless comment. This was a sustained campaign. The answer arrived unexpectedly through someone Sarah never expected to hear from. One evening, her phone rang. The caller was Melissa, a former friend of Emily's. The two women hadn't spoken in years. Sarah nearly ignored the call. Thankfully, she didn't. Melissa sounded nervous. She explained that she had recently learned what was happening within the Mitchell family. At first she wasn't sure whether she should get involved. But after hearing enough stories, she felt guilty remaining silent. Then she said something that stopped Sarah cold. "There's something you need to know about Emily." Sarah's pulse quickened. Melissa took a deep breath before continuing. "This isn't the first time she's done something like this." For several seconds, Sarah couldn't speak. Melissa went on to describe incidents stretching back years. Friendships that ended suddenly. Opportunities that disappeared. Relationships damaged by rumors. In each case, the pattern looked strangely familiar. Emily would present herself as supportive while quietly undermining someone behind the scenes. Most people never connected the dots because Emily was skilled at maintaining her image. She rarely appeared aggressive. She rarely raised her voice. She simply positioned herself as a trusted source of information and allowed doubt to do the rest. Sarah listened in stunned silence. Every word felt like another piece of a puzzle falling into place. The sister she thought she knew was becoming harder and harder to recognize. But Melissa wasn't finished. Before ending the call, she revealed one final detail. A detail that would transform suspicion into certainty. According to Melissa, shortly after Sarah received her dream job offer, Emily made a private comment during a conversation with mutual acquaintances. A comment nobody understood at the time. Emily had reportedly smiled and said, "Let's see how long that opportunity lasts." When Sarah heard those words, a chill ran down her spine. Because for the first time, she wasn't looking at rumors. She was looking at intent. And what she discovered next would reveal that Emily's actions had already gone much further than anyone imagined. Sarah barely slept that night. Long after the phone call with Melissa ended, she sat alone in her apartment staring at the city lights outside her window. For weeks she had been searching for an explanation. Now, for the first time, she felt as though she was getting close to the truth. The problem was that the truth appeared far worse than she had imagined. If Melissa was right, then Emily's behavior wasn't an isolated mistake. It wasn't a moment of jealousy or a careless lapse in judgment. It was a pattern. A pattern stretching back years. Sarah kept replaying the comment Melissa had shared. "Let's see how long that opportunity lasts." The words echoed in her mind. They sounded less like a prediction and more like a promise. The next morning, Sarah decided she needed something stronger than suspicion and second-hand stories. She needed proof. Real proof. Something undeniable. If she was going to accuse her sister of betraying her, she had to be absolutely certain. The consequences would be enormous. Their relationship would never recover. Their family could be torn apart. There could be no room for doubt. Over the following days, Sarah began documenting everything. She collected messages, emails, and notes from conversations. She built a timeline of events beginning with the day she received the job offer. What she discovered was unsettling. Nearly every major rumor about her appeared shortly after private discussions with Emily. The timing was too precise to ignore. Information Sarah shared with almost nobody somehow found its way into family conversations within days. In some cases, within hours. Details that should have remained confidential were circulating among relatives she hadn't spoken to in months. The deeper Sarah looked, the more connections she found. Then came a breakthrough. One evening, her cousin Rebecca called unexpectedly. Unlike most family members, Rebecca had remained neutral throughout the conflict. She wasn't particularly close to either sister, which made her perspective valuable. After exchanging a few pleasantries, Rebecca hesitated before asking a question. "Sarah, did you ever tell Emily about the concerns you had regarding your relocation package?" Sarah froze. The question caught her completely off guard. "Yes," she replied slowly. "Why?" There was a pause. Then Rebecca explained that several weeks earlier, Emily had discussed those exact concerns during a conversation with relatives. Not only that, she had framed the concerns as evidence that Sarah believed the company wasn't paying her enough. According to Emily's version of events, Sarah had been complaining constantly about compensation despite receiving what many considered a dream opportunity. Sarah felt sick. She remembered that conversation perfectly. She had spoken to Emily privately about a complicated relocation issue involving housing assistance. She wasn't complaining. She was seeking advice. Nobody else knew about that conversation. Nobody. The realization hit her like a freight train. Emily wasn't merely spreading rumors. She was taking confidential conversations and reshaping them into something completely different. And she was doing it repeatedly. For the first time, Sarah stopped asking whether Emily was responsible. Instead, she began asking how far the damage had spread. The answer arrived sooner than expected. 3 weeks before her scheduled move, Sarah received an email from the company that had hired her. At first glance, it appeared routine. A request for a meeting. Nothing unusual. But when the meeting finally took place, Sarah immediately sensed something was wrong. The tone felt different. Formal. Guarded. The enthusiasm she had previously encountered was gone. The hiring manager explained that concerns had recently surfaced regarding Sarah's professional conduct and character. The company wanted clarification before proceeding further. Sarah could hardly believe what she was hearing. Someone had contacted them. Someone had provided information designed to undermine her credibility. The hiring manager couldn't reveal every detail, but several allegations sounded disturbingly familiar. Claims that Sarah was difficult to work with. Claims that she frequently spoke negatively about others. Claims that she had a history of creating conflict within personal relationships. Sarah recognized the pattern instantly. These were the same narratives circulating within her family. Only now they had somehow reached her employer. At that moment, the situation stopped being personal. This was no longer about hurt feelings or family drama. Her career was now at risk. Everything she had worked toward was hanging in the balance. When the meeting ended, Sarah sat in her car for nearly an hour unable to move. She felt numb. Exhausted. Terrified. The dream she had spent years building suddenly felt fragile. And for the first time, she allowed herself to consider something she had been avoiding. What if this was intentional? What if someone wasn't simply trying to damage her reputation? What if someone was actively trying to destroy the opportunity itself? The possibility was almost unbearable. Yet the evidence increasingly pointed in that direction. Days later, Sarah made a decision she never thought she would make. She arranged to meet Emily. Alone. No family members. No distractions. No interruptions. Just the two sisters. She didn't tell Emily the real reason for the meeting. Instead, she framed it as a chance to reconnect before the move. Emily agreed immediately. Meeting took place at a small restaurant they had visited many times throughout the years. For a brief moment, sitting across from her sister felt strangely normal. Emily smiled. She asked about the move. She asked about work. She spoke with the same warmth Sarah had always known. If Sarah hadn't uncovered everything she had discovered, she might have believed nothing was wrong. Then she decided to test something. Casually, Sarah mentioned a fictional problem involving her relocation plans. The story was completely fabricated. She claimed the company might be delaying her start date due to internal restructuring. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. Emily responded sympathetically. Then they moved on to other topics. The meeting ended without confrontation. Without accusations. Without drama. Sarah drove home feeling uncertain. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe everyone else was wrong. Maybe there really was another explanation. Then 48 hours later, her phone rang. The caller was Rebecca. She sounded confused. "Sarah," she said, "is it true your company is delaying your start date?" Sarah closed her eyes. The story had traveled exactly where she expected it would. A story that existed nowhere except a private conversation with Emily. A story that was completely false. And now family members were discussing it as fact. In that moment, any remaining doubt disappeared. Sarah finally had confirmation. The person she trusted most had been betraying her. The person she admired growing up. The person she defended countless times. The person she loved like a second mother. Emily. But what Sarah still didn't know was why. And the answer to that question was hidden inside a secret Emily had spent years trying to bury. A secret that would soon turn the entire family against itself. The days following Sarah's discovery were some of the most difficult of her life. For years, she had imagined many possible challenges standing between her and success. Financial struggles, professional setbacks, unexpected obstacles. What she never imagined was that the greatest threat to her future would come from the person she trusted most. Yet now the evidence was impossible to ignore. Emily had been spreading private information, reshaping conversations, and quietly influencing how others viewed her. The question that remained was why. The answer emerged through a conversation Sarah never expected to have. Several weeks later, Rebecca contacted her again. This time, she wasn't calling about rumors. She had recently spoken with another relative who revealed something that changed everything. According to family members, Emily had spent years feeling overshadowed in ways nobody realized. While Sarah had always viewed Emily as the confident, successful older sister, Emily apparently saw things differently. As Sarah's education advanced and her career opportunities expanded, Emily began comparing their lives. What started as insecurity slowly transformed into resentment. Family praise that once focused on Emily now increasingly celebrated Sarah's achievements. Promotions, degrees, professional milestones, each success brought admiration from relatives. Most people saw this as harmless encouragement. Emily saw it as competition. The realization shocked Sarah. Because she had never been competing. Not once. Throughout her life, she had admired her sister. She celebrated Emily's accomplishments. She never viewed success as something that belonged to only one person. But somewhere along the way, Emily had begun measuring her own worth against Sarah's progress. The more Sarah achieved, the more threatened Emily felt. Then came the dream job offer. For Emily, it represented more than a new position. It represented proof. Proof that Sarah's future was becoming everything she feared it would become. A future where Sarah no longer needed anyone's approval. A future where Sarah's success would become impossible to ignore. And according to relatives who later pieced the story together, that was the moment Emily decided she couldn't allow things to continue. The family confrontation finally occurred several months later. By then, enough evidence had surfaced that avoiding the issue was no longer possible. Multiple relatives admitted that Emily had shared misleading information. Others confirmed conversations Sarah supposedly had never actually occurred. Even Rebecca revealed details that exposed the pattern beyond reasonable doubt. One by one, family members began recognizing how they had been manipulated. When Emily was confronted, the room fell silent. For several minutes, she denied everything. Then she minimized it. Then she justified it. Finally, she admitted more than anyone expected. She confessed that she had spoken negatively about Sarah to relatives. She admitted sharing private conversations. She admitted feeling jealous of Sarah's opportunities. What she never seemed to fully understand was the scale of the damage she caused. The dream job Sarah once celebrated eventually disappeared. Whether the rumors directly caused the outcome or merely contributed to it, nobody could say with absolute certainty. But the opportunity was gone. The future Sarah envisioned vanished with it. And unlike a broken object, some opportunities cannot simply be replaced. They pass. They disappear. They belong to a specific moment in time. When that moment is lost, it never returns exactly the same way. For a long time, Sarah struggled with anger. Not because of the job. Not because of the rumors. But because of the betrayal. Trust takes years to build. Sometimes decades. And only moments to destroy. The person who hurt her wasn't an enemy. It wasn't a stranger. It was her sister. The one person she believed would always protect her. Years passed. Life moved forward. Slowly, Sarah rebuilt. She found new opportunities. New friendships. New goals. The road wasn't easy, but she refused to allow someone else's bitterness to define the rest of her life. In many ways, she became stronger than she had ever been before. Not because of what happened to her, but because she survived it. As for Emily, the consequences were different. The family never viewed her the same way again. Trust disappeared. Relationships became strained. People grew cautious around her. While forgiveness eventually entered some conversations, trust never fully returned. And that's a lesson many people learn too late. Forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. Someone can be forgiven. That doesn't mean they regain access to your heart. Years later, Sarah and Emily would occasionally speak during family events. The conversations remained polite, respectful, careful. But the bond they once shared was gone. The sisters Sarah grew up loving existed only in memories. The relationship that once felt unbreakable had become another chapter in the past. Looking back, Sarah eventually realized something important. Emily did steal the future she originally planned. The job, the move, the opportunities attached to that path. Those things were gone. But she didn't steal Sarah's ability to create a new future. She didn't steal her resilience. She didn't steal her determination. And she certainly didn't steal her ability to move forward. Sometimes the people closest to us become the source of our deepest wounds. Sometimes betrayal arrives wearing the face of someone we love. And sometimes the hardest lesson in life is accepting that not everyone celebrating your success is actually happy for you. The woman standing alone in that empty apartment all those years ago believed her future had ended. She was wrong. It wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of a different one. A story built on hard-earned wisdom, painful truth, and the understanding that your future does not belong to anyone else, no matter how hard they try to take it from you. And now we want to hear from you. If someone you loved betrayed you the way Emily betrayed Sarah, would you forgive them? Or would you walk away forever? Let us know in the comments below. And if this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful true life-inspired stories of family, trust, betrayal, and redemption. Because sometimes the most unbelievable stories are the ones that happen inside our own families.